Empathy is the most important, underrated skill in cybersecurity. In this video, I'm going to explain what it is, how you can develop more empathy, and why we need to guard against empathy fatigue. Empathy is the ability to understand the thoughts or feelings of another by putting yourself in their shoes. Psychologists Daniel Goleman and Paul Ekman break empathy down into 3 different types, and I'm going to run through those 3 different types and what they mean. First up, we have cognitive empathy, which is the cognitive ability to put yourself in someone else's position and understand how they might react or how they might be thinking. Cognitive empathy makes us better communicators because we're able to shape information in a way that is going to best reach the intended audience. Secondly, we have emotional empathy, and this is the ability to share the feelings of someone else. It has been described as your pain in my heart. And this type of empathy helps you build emotional connections with others. And thirdly, we have compassionate empathy. This goes beyond simply understanding someone else's feelings or feeling their feelings, sharing their feelings. It actually moves us to action. It prompts us to help in any way that we can. So cognitive empathy is about understanding, emotional empathy is about feeling, and compassionate empathy is about doing. Compassionate empathy is when cognitive and emotional empathy are balanced and they are combined, and then we are motivated to move into action and to try and help someone with their mental, physical, or emotional pain. There are lots of ways we can and should build empathy into our approach to cybersecurity. Drawing on empathy can help us be more effective when we're raising awareness of cybersecurity, when we're communicating about the issues, when we're looking to positively influence behaviours and to shape more positive, proactive cybersecurity cultures. Phishing is the #1 threat to most organizations when it comes to cybersecurity. So let's take phishing as an example and think about how we can take an approach rooted in empathy. Phishing simulations are an obvious example. Many organizations run test phishing exercises now. We can consider 4 ways in which we can approach phishing simulations with empathy. First up, we can use empathy when we are planning the phishing simulation exercise. We can understand, put ourselves in the shoes of our colleagues and recognize that many people may find phishing tests confusing and stressful. So using empathy before you send out any phishing simulations, any tests, you would make sure you have explained to people what the exercise is about, what they can expect, why it matters, and what's expected of them. You would want people to understand that you're not trying to trick them, that this is about supporting their awareness, and that the best thing they can do is report anything suspicious, and you would want to clearly signpost how people can do that. Using empathy, you would also recognize the importance of telling people why reporting matters and the role it can play in keeping them, their colleagues, and the organization safe. Secondly, when choosing phishing templates and planning the phishing simulation, you would think about the kind of emails that are appropriate to send. You would put yourselves in the shoes of your colleagues and think about how they might feel receiving different phishing tests and templates. Doing this would help you avoid using anything that might upset your colleagues and damage the trust relationship that you have with them. So if we're leading with empathy, we would avoid anything like pay increases, pay cuts, job promotions, pensions, and healthcare. I know that scammers use these tactics. I've covered this in a previous video. There are other more effective and less alienating ways to raise awareness of criminal tactics without risking the relationship and the trust that you have with your colleagues. Number 3 in our empathy-rooted approach to phishing is to really think about the metrics and the data. So here we're thinking about the focus of the simulations and what we're really paying attention to. Because if we take a people-centric approach to phishing simulations, then we don't focus on the click rate anywhere near as much as we focus on the report rate. Reporting is the behavior that we want, so we can use positive reinforcement to focus on that and shine a light on that rather than punishment for clicking. When we use empathy, we recognize that the right fish at the wrong time can catch any of us, and that punishing people for clicking, seeing clicking as a failure, is really the opposite of empathy. And number 4, building on 3, we wouldn't take a punishment approach to phishing in general. I know some organizations have a 3 strikes and you're out rule when it comes to clicking on phishing links, whereby if someone does repeatedly click, they either risk being punished or even fired. That punishment, of course, might be sitting through extra training, which really just gives the impression that training is punishment. This whole approach, of course, can build a culture of fear around cybersecurity, which really can just put people off reporting problems, issues, anything suspicious, any potential incidents. This approach also ignores possible unintended consequences on productivity. I have known clients where people are scared to click on anything in case it's phishing and they get punished. So if we're using an empathy-driven approach, instead of punishing people for clicking on links, we would try to get to the root reason of that. Why are people repeatedly clicking, and what can we do to support them to better identify phishing or to know what to do if they receive something that looks suspicious? We would also recognize that the busier somebody is, the more emails they receive, the more likely they are to click on phishing. So actually, when we punish people for repeatedly clicking, we're usually punishing the people who are most stressed, most busy, most burnt out. Speaking of people repeatedly clicking, this makes me think of the language we use in cybersecurity and that phrase, repeat offenders. I have given a keynote at Black Hat Europe Executive Summit about that. I will link to that somewhere here, so you can check that out if you want. But really the problem with this phrase is that, again, it is the opposite of empathy. It's treating people, describing people as if they're career criminals. Some of the words and phrases that we commonly see in cybersecurity make me cringe. They are so lacking in emotional intelligence. If we lead with empathy, we would never call our colleagues repeat offenders. We would never refer to people as the weakest link and use such negative language. Empathy is often misunderstood. People will think you either have it or you don't. But the truth is, we can all develop more empathy. I'm going to share 5 ways in which we can tap into more empathy in cybersecurity. First up, just by wanting to practice more empathy will actually enable you to develop that mindset, because you're more open to putting yourself into somebody else's shoes and you recognize the importance of doing that. Number 2, research suggests that consuming more diverse media and widening your cultural horizons can help you develop more empathy. For example, reading fiction can help you understand other people's perspectives because you get to see inside the minds of other people, other characters that you're reading about. The third way in which you can cultivate more empathy is to ask more questions and practice active listening. This is so important in cybersecurity. We can suffer from the curse of knowledge and think that everybody knows as much about cybersecurity or technology as we do. We also can have a bit of a tendency to get annoyed with people who don't practice secure behaviours in the way that we would like. But if we ask people more about their jobs, about how they interact with cybersecurity, if we understood more about the pressures and the friction that they experience, then we might be able to understand a bit better why they might not be practicing those secure behaviours. The fourth way in which you can build more empathy is to establish more common ground with people. In cybersecurity, we can be guilty of an us and them mentality, where we see users as being very different from us and we separate ourselves out. In sociology, this is known as in-groups and out-groups. This kind of mindset is a big blocker to empathy. If we establish more common ground with people, if we widen what we see as our in-group, then we are more likely to practice empathy. So you can try focusing more on the similarities you share with people rather than just seeing the differences. Number 5, and this is a big one, this is about reserving judgments of people. Empathy often comes down to being open-minded, to being willing to grow and question your assumptions. So the next time someone tells you they use the same password for all of their accounts, instead of rolling your eyes or dismissing them or making some joke, try to really understand why. Put any negative reaction you might have to one side, and going back to the third tip, try to ask them questions about why they just use that one password. Really listen to what they have to say and try to see the situation from their point of view. Empathy can be a draining skill if not practiced carefully. Over-identifying with someone else's emotions can be stressful. According to research at the University of Buffalo, over-empathy can actually lead to cardiovascular stress that is similar to that of being involved in a threatening or painful situation yourself. Empathy fatigue is sometimes described as the negative cost of caring or secondary traumatic stress. It is often seen as occurring for people who work in healthcare, in social work or emergency services, so people who are exposed to crises on a daily basis. Many of us working in cybersecurity are frequently exposed to incidents, to crises, to alerts, to vulnerabilities, to people who are at different stages of distress because they have become a victim of cybercrime. Of course, I'm not saying we are exposed to the same level of trauma as those working in emergency healthcare or social work, but we may also be susceptible to empathy fatigue. So if you're feeling you've got less energy or you've got less empathy than usual, if you're feeling emotionally exhausted or helpless, well, these are all associated with empathy fatigue. To try to ward against this, it's important to take care of yourself, to give yourself a break from work, and to engage in activities that take your mind off work and give you energy. When it comes to empathy, it's also important to put yourself in the right role. This is not so much about having the same feelings as the person that you are responding to or helping. It's more about being able to reflect on how they feel, on their perception of a situation, their experience of a situation, and then being able to help them in the best way for them. I hope this video has helped you understand empathy a little bit more and why empathy is so important in cybersecurity. I hope it's helped you understand some ways that we can develop empathy and the right kind of way to practice empathy to protect ourselves. I'd love to know your thoughts or experiences in the comments.